In Kenya, our diversity is our strength. The world is beautiful, and if you don't find a beautiful place in this world, then come to Kenya, where you can actually experience a lot from the big five, that's the animals, one of the best wonders of the world, as the wild beast migration, and diverse cultures, peaceful environment, and actually good terrain for training, and good places to relax your mind and be at peace of mind.
The wait is over. After what seemed like endless months and weeks of staying at home, it's time to once again take to travel. It's time to go on an adventure, relax, unravel, and unwind. At Magical Kenya, we have missed you. And while you were away, a lot happened. Our rhino population increased in number. So did our elephants and giraffes. The vast plains of the Mara became greener. And we reviewed our health and safety protocols to ensure a safe travel to destination Kenya in the new normal. We have put in place all the necessary measures to make your travel safe and relaxed, from your flight to your hotel of choice, or even as you head out for a game drive. Nothing has been left to chance. With this in mind, it's time now to rediscover the magic of Kenya and nourish your wanderlust. We are ready to reconnect you with nature as you explore new adventures and discover new places. And there's quite a lot of catch-up to do. Come experience the great wildebeest migration at the Masai Mara. Or if you're into aquatic escapades, then the incredible whale migration at the coast awaits you. Sample a variety of sumptuous dishes from across the country. So, pack up your bags and get ready to treat yourself to an exciting adventure as you rediscover the true magic of Kenya. Magical Kenya. Rediscover the magic.
Hello and welcome to this very insightful panel discussion on domestic tourism to the rescue. COVID restrictions are still largely fluid all over the world, so we've been very, very reliant on our domestic tourists to keep our tourism industry afloat, whether you're outbound or whether you're inbound. And in addition to this economic impact that COVID has had on our economy, we've also had to change the way that we do business so that we make sure that we're appealing to the domestic market because their needs are very different to those international tourists that we have. So how do we as a tourism and travel industry work to grow this domestic plant, especially in places where traditionally there wouldn't really be a strong domestic tourism market? Joining me to unpack this today, we have Evelyn Mhlaba, SA Tourism's Regional General Manager for Africa, Muturi Kinyamu, the co-founder of TurnUp.travel, who's based in Kenya. We have Sue Garrett, who's the General Manager for Product and Marketing at the Flight Centre Travel Group. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, gentleman, one gentleman would be. So I'm going to start with Evelyn, if I may, since you are so proactive in this domestic market space. Tell me a little bit about how important the domestic market is for the South African tourism economy.
Hi, thank you, Natalie, and thank you for being here, for inviting me here. I think for us as South African tourism, the domestic market has always been important, even pre-COVID, because for any destination to actually do best in their tourism space, they need to have a very strong domestic travel. So for us, domestic has been that important. And also now it has become even more important because of where we find ourselves due to the effects of the COVID-19. So the importance, and both on arrivals as well as the value, is very important to see that the recovery now, and also previously to actually ensure that the industry does benefit positively with the arrivals and revenue from domestic.
So did you have to switch up your strategy? Did you have to change your marketing at all? Did you have to look at what you were doing with short left and say, oh, I've got to change it up a little bit so that it is more kind of COVID friendly, or really going after the domestic market? Did you have to change anything?
We just had to up the tempo a bit. What had happened previously, what we found out with the short left, as you know, 2019 was one of our best years in terms of the domestic travel. So what we actually had to do was just to ensure that we improve on our digital assets and the digital marketing, so that we can be able to reach more people while we're still also on lockdown. So what we needed to do was just to up our tempo, as well as an organization, to start reviewing, some of our activities to switch onto the domestic space.
So I know part of that journey was working with the tourism and travel trade in South Africa, and I'd like to bring Sue in here, because Sue, from a Flight Centre travel group perspective, you were in the business, yes, of selling travel in South Africa, but you were also in the business of selling travel to Mauritius and to Thailand and across Africa, corporate and leisure. And now you've pivoted, to use a very overused term, so well in the domestic tourism space. You've done a ton of campaigns, a lot of really, really good work to position domestic travel in the minds of your South African consumers. Tell me a little bit about what you've done.
Perfect. Thanks, Natalia, and great to be here. It's funny, I was actually just thinking, it was this time last year where we all kind of went into panic mode. I think it was today or tomorrow, a year ago. So a lot had to change in the business if we were going to survive. And we started work probably 3 weeks into the hard lockdown, so probably mid-April last year, on how do we get South Africans moving again when we can move. That was our number one priority. It didn't matter that we couldn't move internationally, and we had no idea of when we'd be able to move internationally. Our aim was, how do we get people moving locally? And we worked on a project for probably around about 3 months, until I remember the day clearly, in August, when it was announced that we could travel within our own provinces, and launched several campaigns, one after another, with specific product that really, like I say, is explore your backyard. You didn't have to fly. A lot of people were very nervous of getting on planes, so we really promoted the self-drive, the motorhomes, getting out and exploring South Africa, and worked very, very closely with Evelyn and the team at SA Tourism on bringing this campaign to life. And I think the best thing about it is South Africans are traveling locally and continue to do so, which is fantastic.
Has it been surprising? Have you been surprised at the kind of uptake and the demand?
Absolutely, Natalia. And, just pulling through and having a look at domestic room nights numbers. If I have a look at February this year compared to February last year, we're actually sitting on par. So although last year there was a lot more travel in general happening, but the numbers are, have come right the way back up on the domestic front. And I think the exciting part about the domestic travel is obviously South Africans exploring South Africa in any way that they choose to. But what I'm loving seeing is a lot of South Africans actually spending a lot of money exploring our country. You know, in the past it was kind of only a weekend away or you know, a special occasion maybe for 2 or 3 nights, but the long stays and the luxury stays is fantastic to see, because obviously people that would normally go to the Mauritius or European destinations or, you know, any of those destinations are staying home and are spending their holiday money at home, which is brilliant to see.
That is brilliant to see. Right, switching it up from South Africa, we go to East Africa, Muturi. So you work in the domestic tourism space. Is there a large domestic tourism market in Kenya? And did that change as a result of COVID? Are you also seeing an increase in demand?
I mean, so for us in Kenya, thankfully, domestic market has been gradually increasing, you know, from 2013, looking at numbers, to 2018. Domestic was almost at about 5.5 million bed nights. So it was something that was growing. It's not something we had to switch to as, you know, as when COVID happened. The second thing is, of course, in the absence of international arrivals, then we, of course, everyone now looks inwards. So there was, of course, the need to recalibrate, open up new regions. But most important, I think it's how people, especially travel trade, and for us, were able to work with the restrictions that were in place, of course, for safety and health and wellness, but also the compliance in terms of the guidelines that were provided by the Ministry of Health. So I remember, you know, thinking about what, you know, the arrival of COVID means for us, and it was like, you know, this thing doesn't have, you know, a cut-off date. So we're gonna remain open. Thankfully, our business is diverse. So besides travel experiences side, we have travel media and content production side, and another aspect that does just CSR and impact. So we're able, I think, to reassign resources in terms of team and retain everyone, and then sort of use that to continue. But it has been demand that's growing. When I look at the different circuits that we have, Northern Kenya has opened up. Of course, people can't go to Dubai, then they have to do desert safaris here. As Sue was talking about, I think the up market AB class of people that used to be purely going abroad for luxury holidays, so they've had to spend that, you know, within the country, which has been fantastic. So you find we had an expo over the weekend, and you know, properties are fully booked for Easter, recording good numbers, occupancy all through to August. So I think domestic market has been able to cushion, of course, the industry. But then, to be honest, I think we cannot solely rely on it. It's a great contributor. It's been growing, but then I think, you know, the country having been open for the last, you know, from August, we've also seen some international arrivals. But I mean, Kenyans have been very, you know, dedicated and then frequently traveling into different parts of the country. So that's been fantastic.
That's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that the domestic market is supporting their tourism product in Kenya, and long may it last. But as you said, you know, it can't be the only tourism plant or the tourism demand that we've got. And I guess that for me is something that I'm quite concerned about. When we get back to some level of new normality, Evelyn, over to you. How do we ensure that that domestic tourism focus stays when international travel returns? Because, you know, as tourism product, we're used to serving an international tourists, and we have a specific product for that and specific pricing for that. And now all of a sudden, Sue's customers are able to benefit from going to those fantastic Sabi Sands lodges at prices that they can afford. So how do we keep the focus on domestic tourism? Because we know that that is important for a tourism industry to be successful once those international travelers come back.
I'll be very sad if we ever go back to, to a time where domestic is disregarded in this country. One thing I would like to highlight before I answer to that is the organizations and within the travel space that were already looking at the domestic market and marketing excessively domestically have actually reaped the rewards during this time. I'll make an example because we've got Sue with us here. Flight Center, as far back as almost 3 years ago, we started working together where they actually looked at the majority of the South African public and tried to attract the previously individuals that were not traveling by coming up with a campaign that was targeted at the Stokvels. So again, we managed to actually move a lot of individuals because value for money is still quite important for the domestic market. And having a diverse offering that a Flight Center had, actually we managed to actually push a whole lot of numbers with that. So what I would wish to see is we continue on that trajectory. And the reason why it is important, even when the international markets are back, is that with our research, when we do our brand research, we find that a lot of international travelers travel to a destination. One of the things they want to do is to engage with the locals. So they come to a country so that they can engage with the people of South Africa. So if we do not market effectively to the domestic market, that means there won't be anybody to interact with. Therefore, it will make South Africa not necessarily be a viable proposition for people to come through. So it is imperative that we continue and do better in ensuring that the domestic market actually travels.
Sue, you've been working with SA Tourism now for the last 3 years, and I know it's not possible to change people's tourism product overnight so that it suits the domestic market, but perhaps some insights into, from your experience, what the domestic market is actually looking for out of the tourism product that exists here in South Africa, and perhaps how that has changed. And then if I could ask the rest of the speakers to weigh in on that as well.
Thanks, Natalia. Absolutely, I agree with Evelyn. And I think domestic tourism is absolutely critical. For me, it's always been about just getting people moving and getting people out experiencing travel the first time. And a lot of that, does come down to the domestic travel. But I agree with you, Natalia. I think the way South Africans are looking to travel South Africa has fundamentally changed. If I think about pre-COVID, like I mentioned earlier, it was very much, exploring your country for a weekend, a long weekend away, and not making a long stay of it, or not doing those road trips. I remember as a kid doing road trips and how exciting they were. And we're seeing a lot more of that come back. And I do think that will stay for a while. I think there is still going to be that level of uncertainty. I think, once borders do open up, absolutely, there'll be some pent-up demand. But I do think that the domestic market will continue exploring, maybe not only within our borders, but, the SADC region, moving more into regional Africa, because, it's close to home, it's affordable, and it's safe, which I think is going to be around for a period of time. And, yes, we've spoken about the luxury side of, what we're seeing with South Africans spending what would have been international holiday money, spending that locally. But I do think even we understand, those Sabi lodges, and, those lodges are built and targeted to the international traveler coming in, and that's how they'll survive. They won't be able to continue with the level of service and the properties that they do have based on, the current South African residency rates, and we want to make sure they survive as well. So I do think, yet again, the way South Africans will travel South Africa will change again. Right now it's in that luxury space, but I think doing the adventure side of South Africa and the exploring side of Africa, like Evelyn mentioned, even South Africans want to see South Africans and interact locally with South Africans. So I think it will continue to evolve, probably for the next 2 to 3 years until the world does return to some level of normality. But I think for us, it's an opportunity, all South Africans and all of us in the industry. I mean, it's our duty to make sure our industry survives and our country survives, and however we can best do that, I think that's all of our responsibility.
Muturi?
I think for us, it's in Kenya, I mean, the focus has really been on sustainability. And I don't see the priority change. I think these two can coexist. There has been, of course, realignment in terms of, learning how to serve the domestic market, which I don't assume that will disappear in terms of focus. The other thing that I think slowly maybe disappearing is the seasons that we're used to, so peak and whatever, because we don't have a traditional tourist. So it means if you're an all-around destination, all year-round destination, with 300 days of sunshine, you can have people, you can change traveler behavior, and that makes the hoteliers, airlines, to sort of, I think, change their offering to bring different people all year. So we don't have to travel over Easter only. We don't have to travel over Christmas. So we, and I've seen the second thing that has been there, of course, Kenyans respond a lot to offers and deals and, pay slowly with mobile money. And so that has been something that as well, of course, with all the financial constraints that people are having, a staggered payment plan, combined with some offers, compelling offers, have been able to unlock some demand, and then of course, coupled with social media and, campaigns, just to show a bit of how, again, safety is your priority, where you could still go wherever you are ready, these places are open. I foresee, of course, international arrivals will take a bit, years to get back to 2019 numbers. So again, if you're thinking of survival, which everyone is clearly, domestic has to be your focus. We're getting into elections next year. So it's gonna be a long ride before we get back to those 2019 international arrivals. So it's domestic or die for us, I think.
Domestic or die.
even for us, Natalia, I think the most important thing, just to weigh in on what Muturi was saying, is that deals, discounted packages, and are the thing that drive travel. So people do not necessarily want to travel on particular periods, but they are willing to trade off if the price is right. And as we know, the domestic market, the one thing that our consumers are saying is that the only thing that they see majority advertised are those that are too expensive for them to can afford. So we will be doing a lot of campaigns that drive special deals, and that's where the South African tourism industry become very important, because for us to do that and talk about the offering out there, we need them to come to the party to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And I mean, backing that up, Evan, like you said, as long as the price is right, I think the consumers in general are looking for value for money rather than cheap prices. Is, having the opportunity to stay at places that you never would in the past, regardless of kind of the bracket that you're looking to travel in. It's the value for money.
But also, what
becomes, sorry, Natalia, it becomes very important that the offering itself is value for money. So, because it's not only about where the people are going to stay, but it's what's happening in and around the places. So it's important that when we market, we actually show what activities are there to do. People are looking for bush experiences. So you don't necessarily need to be in the very expensive high-end lodges, but you need to be close by to be able to can experience the bush. And people are looking at the beach and the berg. We call them the triple B. That's what people are looking for. So instead of just promoting a hotel, it's about the area around the hotel and the activities that people can do.
Yeah, promote destination first, product later. We always tell ourselves this, but sometimes we don't remember. What I was loving sorry to bring it back to you, Mutuli, what I was loving about what you were saying, and it triggered something that Evelyn said a little bit earlier about what Flight Centre had done, is the idiosyncrasies of how we travel as Africans. So the fact that we have this advanced mobile payment solution, and the stock fell that Flight Centre introduced 3 odd years ago. You know, nowhere else in the world would you have these kind of culturally interesting ways of facilitating travel that we have here in Africa. And I think, you know, I always say within constraint comes the opportunity for you to be creative and to come up with different ways of tapping into the domestic market. Are you guys seeing anything else that's like very idiosyncratic of your specific markets, and then trying to make it easier for people just based on those little nuances? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I think, let me go first. There is, I think, the unbundling of travel that has just been accelerated by people need their own space, privacy, but then, you know, it's the same, there's still the same conversations around like Airbnb versus hotel. I think you can have, you know, they're not like in the same, you know, you can have either or both. But I think in Kenya, the other thing is we have counties, and counties have like these administrative units. And so people, we've been able, I think, to develop sub-brands out of these counties into destinations. So people have a lot of awareness of what's around them, in terms of attractions, activities, infrastructure has improved. So even if you have a small vehicle, you want to use a PSVs, you can do a bit of that. This is very important, I think, for us as a country because of what people perceived tourism to be, you know, from someone coming from outside. And in the absence of that, I think Kenyans find themselves in all these places they never used to think they could be in. So there is some sense of, I could do this as a lifestyle, as it's a part of my life, you know, I could do more of this, you know. So there is a lot more utility that's coming from tourism, the consumption of tourism products that wasn't there before. Of course, there is a lot of discovery. People are on their screens, are on Zoom, are on, you know, YouTube. So people are discovering things that are on their backyard. I think the other thing that I would speak to is, I think the social proof of travel and you know, imminently the bucket list is, you know, a lot more real now. So people are, you know, stepping out and sort of, I think, you know, it's a good thing, I think, for the destination right now. And so I hope culturally that continues. It doesn't have to be an afterthought. It doesn't have to be a Christmas thing. It can be, you know, an all year, wherever you're ready. And you can save. And in teaching people to stop a lot of, I think, credit is super huge in the country. So a lot of, you know, mobile money lending has been huge. So again, we're trying to encourage consumers to save for their travels, do installments, you know, and travel whenever they're ready, I can afford it. Yeah.
Love that. Evelyn?
And also what we've actually seen that is uniquely in, you know, for us in South Africa and in the continent is the use of local slang in advertising. You know, before with advertising, especially of travel, it was so prim and so proper, you know, like, but now it's actually to appeal to the people. You have to speak in their language. You have to speak in the terms that are used on every day. So for people to actually even find your advertising and therefore do the things that you want them to do is the use of local slang.
Well, we have Sue, who's an art marketer in the room, and I'm kind of curious about this, Sue, because I can only imagine how difficult it must be. We talk about South Africa. I'm not sure, Mutuli, if it's the same there. It probably is, but we're not talking about a country with one market segment. You know, you have people who speak 11 different languages, who have X number of cultures. So we have to create travel marketing for such a diverse number of people, and creating marketing that appeals to this very disparate, very diverse market, essentially, must be impossible, because you cannot have one message that resonates across the board, surely.
It's a very interesting point, Natalia, and it's probably one that we've heavily debated over the years. Like, should we do things differently to appeal to a certain customer or a certain segment or a certain demographic? And I tend to think that you can do things subtly to appeal to different markets and different demographics, but it doesn't have to be blatant. I just think in a lot of travel companies in South Africa, we've been around a long time, and you kind of have a database of customers that are used to dealing with you in one way, or your messaging and the product that you deliver. It doesn't make it necessarily different that you have to change the language to appeal to another segment of the market. I think it all does come down to where you're seen, on what platforms you're seen, with what messaging you're seen using. But I think it still all comes down to that value for money positioning as a brand, that you talk to attract customers.
And Muturi, is it the same in Kenya? Do you have kind of very diverse markets?
Demographically and culturally, in terms of tribes, we have about 44 different tribes. And again, as I mentioned, we have now county governments that are, 47 of those administrative units. I think, to your question, this is where I see influencers and key personalities coming in, because they are able to speak to their audiences in a language they understand, in a relatable way. And since I assume everyone is aspirational, they look up to these, people. So social media has been very key in terms of the inspiration, in terms of discovery of places, and in terms of the documentation, and that's the social proof that people just need to again spur new pockets of travel or get the messaging out. If you look at like luxury travel, been doing campaigns that are very low key, because again, you don't want to show overtly extreme consumption when people are suffering. But then again, social media, I think, and you look at all the conversations happening on WhatsApp, all these things, people are documenting their travels and sharing that with people. So they make very good brand advocates, and they, each platform has its kind of its different vibe. People on TikTok are doing their content differently. People on Snapchat, people on Instagram, stories. So I foresee that becoming a lot more mainstream, and a lot more targeted, that you could have key personalities just speaking to a particular segment within your locality. And so it's an opportunity to work with them, and of course, hopefully measure the ROI and see what works and learn from that. Yeah.
And also, Natalia, I think it's quite important to highlight that this has been coming about since 2 years ago. Travelers are looking for hyper-personalized experiences. People don't want to see everything that everybody else sees. And that's the beauty of digital and social media, because you can be that targeted at a very reasonable pricing, so that you appeal to those individuals and you speak to them in a manner that appeals to them. So when you look at how people also consume different advertising and so forth, it's about lifestyle tribes. So I love cooking. Chances are I'll be on those type of platforms that promotes cooking. So it's about gastronomy through travel. So there, the language that will be spoken, and even the lingo that will be used, it will appeal to me, whether I'm from South Africa or I'm from Kenya or Nigeria, because we've got the same thing. So what marketers need to do now is to really invest in the social media tools, because that's where, you know, the little money that we have can go a long way, and be, most importantly, be able to measure the ROI and or the engagement, so that you can be able to switch and change your advertising to appeal even better.
That's a great segue to my next question, and I'll go with wine tourism. That's why I want to travel. And lucky we have a lot of that in South Africa, so I'm very happy. Not sure about Kenya, Muturi, you're going to have to persuade me. But it's talking about domestic travel with a purpose. So this is completely anecdotal. I have no stats to back this up, so you can absolutely shoot me down. But I have a sense that people are traveling at the moment domestically for purpose. So whether it's going to go play golf, for example, at a fan court, or maybe there's a special celebration that they weren't able to do last year, like a 50th birthday or some anniversary or something, that they think, well, this year there's a little bit less restrictions in place. I can travel for a purpose. I can travel for that celebration. And then they travel in a bubble, for example. I'm kind of getting a sense from the people that I'm speaking to that is the kind of domestic travel that is happening. I'd be very curious to find out from both Sue and Muturi if that is what they're seeing on the ground in their respective markets.
If I may, we specialize a lot with themed experiences, from festivals, photographic tours hosted by personalities and that kind of thing. What I would say is, of course, in the absence of some of these key events, there has, I think, new, or rather things that were still there, that people are still getting married, people are still having kids, people are still meeting new partners, kids are back home from school. So there's certain things that have been part of, and especially if you look at the upper high-end market, even the middle class, most of them are not super affected financially, but socially in terms of lifestyle. So they still need products like honeymoons, retreats, and that kind of thing, birthdays. So in terms of targeting, it's been one of the things that I've seen tour operators sell to and of course people responding to. Of course, there has been the other side of such gatherings in terms of as well targeting, being, are you putting guys at risk? What's the right way, and of course, giving people the privacy they need as a family or an organized group. But the market has been responding to that. I remember even as of September last year, you would still see people even traveling a lot longer and slower. So if people are doing bookings like families, they would go for more than like 5-6 nights. Previously, they would be shorter and more spontaneous. So you're saying if you have to really go through all the hoops and all that to jump, then just go there for longer, private catering, all that. So, you look at like occupancy in like your boutique camps, those guys don't have, problems with demand because they are fully booked, because for that kind of property, they already have the offering that suits to some of these, celebrations. Exclusivity has become a lot more, it's no longer, luxury. But, I think to Eva's point, there is a lot more need to personalization. So that used to be for a particular segment, but it's the demands for clients across demographics has been just the same. People want a bit more tailoring, people want a bit more, can I come with kids? Is it safe? What should we do? And all those things. So yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree, Natalia. And I think, people traveling with a purpose or for a special occasion, certainly we've seen that, the small group travel. And I think the other side of it that we are seeing is the multi-generational local travel. People have been isolated from family. So we are seeing, small groups, but it's family or friends, actually getting together and traveling, which is fantastic. But on the other side of that, we are also seeing, and you chat to a lot of our customers, and and it's around escapism. People are wanting to escape, and whether that's, you know, to somewhere that is fairly isolated, or it's that need to escape family a lot of the time, you know, to actually have that space and get away. So I think there's so many different elements to the local travel right now that people are looking domestically to fulfill. But, you know, certainly I think it's for a plethora of reasons. And we are seeing a spike in solo travel as well. And I think that leads to that escapism, you know, actually just needing a bit of a break from my life. So it's interesting.
A bit of a break from my life, and also the fact that I deserve it. You know, this hard lockdown that I've had to go through, I deserve a break. Come on.
True that. And from our end, what we actually saw was that when we moved from COVID level, when we went to level 3, when people started going out, people started doing activities, day activities, days excursions, and so forth. And I'll use hiking as an example. People started going into doing hiking trails. Even people that used not to hike started doing those activities. So when we moved, as the levels were loosened, people started now traveling overnight for those activities. So again, you know, the beauty of this whole travel is that there are opportunities for day visits, because that's how people graduate to overnight. So we've seen that during COVID, that they started doing things in and around their area. Now they're overnighting to do those activities in other provinces and locales.
Is there any fear of travel? You know, we talk about South Africans and Africans being more robust, perhaps. Sorry, international tourists, don't beat me, but you know, that they seem to be a little bit less sensitive to shocks, if you will. Are they afraid to travel? And if they are afraid to travel in Kenya or in South Africa, what are their fears? Is it health and hygiene protocols? Is it that things will go into lockdown and they won't be able to travel? What's stopping them from traveling?
Let me speak to that from two ways. So in Q4 of 2020, we partnered with a local airline, a subsidiary of Kenya Airways, and the campaign was called Now Travel Ready. And it was, the organizers farm trips, but then they had influencers, they had a production crew. So, and the idea was to give customers a journey through check-in, the airport, health and safety, activities to do, and you know, whatever is open, because besides the safety and people's concerns about wellness, was like, how do these destinations look like now? You know, how is life? Places, is my favorite bar open? Are they implementing protocols? And again, the second thing is there was an information overload, you know, in terms of things that people needed to remember, to carry, and concerns as simple as, is there social distancing on aircraft? Is there social distancing on the trains? So you kind of give them what it's like and give them a walkthrough. Of course, working with influencers. The second, that was very effective because it just came before the festive season. So the whole purpose was, you know, to combine that visibility to drive, you know, bookings to these hotels, to these airlines, and of course, meet that demand. But the second thing is, there is the apprehension, especially when it comes to now regional travel, because of the different approaches that countries have had to COVID. So between lockdowns, between requirements, so they are not harmonized, and they do change, you know, in terms of requirements. Do you need 96 hours, 72? What do you need to enter, to come back? You know, Zanzibar is free, no vaccine required, Tanzania requires, you know, all those things. So there, of course, domestic, if you look at like Africa as a domestic market, because that's how we are, you know, we've started like reopening from, you know, Kenya. So we're not doing like packages to Rwanda, for example, or Indian Ocean Islands. So it has to reopen with that proximity, that people don't want to fly so long and get caught up somewhere in winter, so that proximity is key. And the same applies if someone is coming all the way, long haul flight, then the offering has to be very compelling as well, because again, is it really worth it coming all the way? So I think digital communications and visual assets have been very empowering in showing COVID compliant content. It does improve the confidence. It does bring some urgency that I can now go. I can go now. Or I can start planning my travels. It does also remove the guilt that, why would you be thinking of a holiday when everyone else, but, it gives people a glimpse into the world. It keeps them dreaming about better days. And I think that's what vacations represent, that there is still hope at the end of all this. You can go later if you're not comfortable going now. You can start saving for that from the little you earn. And you can start from where you are, from your country, from your province, from your city, and keep going. So that's, I've seen social media combined with compelling offers, and I think cross-stakeholder collaboration, because I think COVID is not unique to any country, to any destination. So it's also something we have to just tackle and pull our hands together, and restart tourism.
Yeah, and interestingly, Natalia, I think, the question on do Africans feel safe in traveling generally, and I think we are a lot more resilient than a lot of other nations. But we recently ran that Gen Z survey out on social and also to our database, just to see what the mood and the take on was out there of travelers and when they feel comfortable traveling. And interestingly, it was close to 10,000 respondents we had, and domestically there was no fear. That came across very evidently. Happy to travel locally. International, once borders open, there was a bit more trepidation in that approach. And the number one reason wasn't health and safety. I think that came in and around number 4, the protocols, but was the fear of being stranded. If countries went into lockdown and you were outside your country, could you get home? Which we saw a lot of this time last year when the world went into lockdown. So, from what we're seeing, and having taken a few breaks myself, everything is full. So I think South Africans are fairly comfortable.